Hello, and welcome to the first episode of a new rebooted series of Politidash. I'm Toby Lipati-Mesme, and Politidash is a series on YouTube where I take you through every day or every other day a major story in UK or US politics or global politics and dissect it and delve into it in a nuanced manner from a left-wing perspective. So thank you for joining us for episode 1. We actually have a camera now. I'm not particularly used to being on camera for things like this, so hi. How are you doing? The fringe may be an issue, but that's all fine. Ignore the dressing gown in the corner as well, and the picture of a cat over there from when I unfortunately punched my wall once. But that's a long story. So, welcome along. Today's story is how Afghanistan and the emerging situation with the Taliban there shows the folly of forever wars. So, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary folks as well, the Hawks are losing their minds with the Biden administration's approach, the US Biden administration's approach to withdrawal from Afghanistan, because clearly on the ground, some stuff is going wrong now in Afghanistan with the Taliban basically starting to overrun areas of territory and heading into the cities. The Hawks are losing their mind and basically saying this repudiates everything about the Biden withdrawal, and Biden needs to get those American troops back on the ground. We hear this. Apparently, the full withdrawal was advised against by Biden's defense team. So it's in the New York Times today. So Biden's defense secretary, presumably the chiefs of staff, people at the Pentagon, that sort of thing, to be expected, really, because the prevailing sort of neoconservative ideology has behind those institutions has permeated both Clinton administration, Bush administration, Obama administration. It's a cross-party thing. Trump administration as well, though to a lesser extent. It's a cross-party thing. Partly because of ideological reasons. This sort of America should be the police force of the world, but also partly just because of cold hard material calculations, i.e. this is a cash cow and we want to keep the cash cow going, which again, much of what the Pentagon does is basically just a massive cash cow. We know this. It's the most bloated, irrationally bloated defense budget in the world going to that institution. But basically, you've got former Clinton people, former Obama people, both taking up this critique and saying this is trouble. Maybe not necessarily saying out loud what they really think in their hearts, which is we need to get back in there, humanitarian invention, all that sort of stuff. But still tacitly critiquing what Biden is doing here and the approach of this administration. Basically thinking of it as basically a neo-isolationist mode of foreign policy and something that no good liberal, no good progressive should have anything to do with. However, at the same time, the other end of the spectrum, we have Republicans, particularly in the Senate, where they're more neoconservative and less sort of right-wing populist, although there are plenty of right-wing populists in the Senate. You have Republicans, spearheaded by the likes of Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney, really sort of the country club Republicans, if you like, really going heavy, kicking off on the critique of this, even though their presidential nominee in the last 2 cycles basically made his whole thing no to forever wars, even though he didn't actually end the forever wars. He spent a lot of time talking about that, and he certainly got a whole lot of votes from that. But even though still that is the case, it doesn't seem to matter to these people particularly, because they are really kicking off like this is the worst thing in the world. And the fact Biden's actually followed through on withdrawing, whereas Obama said he'd withdraw, didn't follow through on it. Trump said he'd withdraw, didn't follow through on it. Biden's actually nominally, not fully, followed through on a withdrawal. They are really kicking off at it too, which just shows they are neoconservatives. That's what they want. They want America to be a global police force. No one interested in justice or peace anywhere in the world should want the United States to be the world's police force. It's like putting a gang of bank robbers in charge of watching the vault. You don't do it, okay? The record of American intervention tells us, America, please God, do not intervene anywhere. Under practically any basically no circumstances, okay? You've tried, you made a hash of it, never do it again. ever. Okay, ever. Even if there was some sort of crazy situation where there genuinely needed to be an I'm struggling right now to think of a situation where you could genuinely justify some sort of intervention around the world. But even if there was such a need, the US should never be trusted to do anything like that ever again. I mean, we laugh, but it's really not funny. The life's destroyed by these sort of interventions. Okay, so where is Biden on all this? Well, you can be quite surprised. Biden appears on these sort of things to be much less hawkish, much more isolationist on things like troops in the Middle East. Hillary Clinton was definitely not sort of this heavy on it. One of the reasons Trump managed to sort of hammer her so much in 2016. At the same time, you've got Obama. He promised. Apparently, Biden at the time wanted the troops out of Afghanistan. Obama actually oversaw more surges to combat the Taliban and sort of rising dissidents like that in the region, basically. And that whole thing is the whole American thing of we want stability, which for America basically means a strong source of revenue. It's not genuinely out of concern for the well-being of the people that absolutely would suffer and will suffer under the Taliban. It's not out of concern for those people. It is more out of... that's how they sell it to the public. Look how horrible this horrible group is. That's why we need to make things a million times worse by going over there. So Biden wasn't on board with Obama's surges, and now he doesn't intend. All reports, again, this is in the New York Times today, he does not intend to budge on this. He's staying solid on it. He doesn't want to budge on it. That's positive. There is the possibility, if one of the major cities, maybe the capital, or one of the sort of secondary capitals of Afghanistan is overrun by the Taliban, you could really see the pressure amping up on the media, the political pressure. You could see Biden sort of going, right, we'll put more peacekeeping forces in. Particularly, I think there's 4,000 people at a US embassy in the capital, which would imply to me that's the sort of instance where Joe Biden might reverse his approach. That would obviously, in my view, that would be a mistake. In my view, there should be no US presence in the region on the ground. It should not be the case. It should never have been the case. However, you could see Biden bowing to domestic political pressure there. Although hopefully not. So the whole this whole thing, right? This whole situation, we have an unstable, semi-unpopular, but, it's mixed bag government in Afghanistan that's basically been propped up by the West. And you have the Taliban and all the brutality they unleash, and you have this sort of clashing, the government not able to sustain itself, though some of that's overblown by the hawks, and you've got the Taliban basically overrunning places. All of this shows that the US policy in this region was futile. If this region can't sort of hold itself steady, after 20 years of forever wars in the Middle East, after many years of US involvement directly in Afghanistan under Obama, under Trump as well. That shows US policy here, which was supposed to be, we're going to make it stable again. All this sort of, Western world, we can go and fix it for these people. Never works. It's caused so much unimaginable suffering. They have put in place, there's more education, there are more schools, things like that. Those things aren't going to last because of the fact, the way the US did this, the fact it was an intervention means it's never going to stick. And the minute they go, it's all going to fall in on itself, right? The whole thing has been, from a policy perspective, from the perspective of the well-being of people in the Middle East, has been an absolute disaster. It should never have happened. And it's clearly not helped anyone, because if the minute the US leaves, this happens, what was the point? US can't stay there indefinitely. This was ridiculous. And that's, at its core, we're heading for an Afghanistan no better than when America came in, invaded, basically, so intervened. So, another catastrophic failure for American foreign policy and another sort of punch to the bloody nose of the American empire. Make no mistake, Afghanistan was an American defeat. America failed in its objectives, and it has left Afghanistan barely any better off, in some ways worse off, than when they arrived. In certain ways, marginally better off, not going to last, in many ways worse off. It was always going to happen like this. It doesn't redeem hawkish talking points about this is why we need to go back into Afghanistan. No! Insanity is repeating yourself again and again and again. That's what doing that would be doing. Why would you... This has shown is that this approach doesn't work. Please, God, don't do it again. It's a condemnation of Western foreign policy, Western foreign policy making, particularly in terms of foreign policy, for the last 2 decades, from the likes of the EU, the US, Britain, NATO. These sort of ideological organisations. It's been a failure. Okay, Western foreign policy in the Middle East has been an absolute affront, a moral outrage, a stream of countless brutalities, and a failure. By the parameters these people set, don't need to talk about whether they're the right parameters or not, but by the parameters these people set, people in the States, people in NATO, they failed. They have failed. And Afghanistan is worse off for it. So thanks very much, America, for a waste of so much money, so many human lives, and you've accomplished nothing. So Biden, more broadly on Middle East policy, there is room for some sort of anti-interventionist shifts. Partly because of Trump, partly because of just a general, the public basically getting the message sooner than American policymakers. The political winds have shifted in a direction that means, to be popular, Biden is going to be more isolationist, less interventionist in terms of the Middle East. Too soon to tell which way that goes. We still have a slavish, basically, devotion to defending Israel no matter what sort of policies are implemented by the Israeli government, and sort of the apartheid system in place there. We have, that Biden, if anything, is going to increase that, although realistically Obama did the same thing. You might see a tiny bit of sort of relenting compared to Trump, but not by much. In terms of Cuba and China, we are seeing the war machine actually ratcheted up, worse than under Obama for both those countries, and in some ways worse than under Trump, although in case of Cuba it's sort of equal or, and in terms of China, genuinely with Biden we are seeing a more confrontational tone in many regions than with Trump, outside climate change, where there could be constructive dialogue. So in terms of forever wars, Biden is actually speaking sense about sort of basically dispelling the talking points spouted in liberal and conservative media, the hawkish talking points about we can't leave, this destabilises the region, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, very ironic considering his record on things like Iraq, historically, which did him quite a bit of damage in the primary campaign, those videos. But in other areas of foreign policy, Biden is really ratcheting up the war machine, and maybe one of the worst US presidents for a long time. So it's a mixed bag. It is still a world blighted by the fact America sees fit to meddle in other people's affairs. That's the world we continue to live in under the Biden administration. Thank you very much for watching Politidash. I will be back, same time, same place, very soon. Thanks for watching.